The scream that escaped my lips wasn't human. It wasn't a sound I had ever made before. It tore through my throat like shattered glass. My grandson's body was lying limp on the tiled kitchen floor, his tiny frame bruised, barely breathing. And beside him stood the man I had once called my husband, holding the leather belt soaked in our baby's blood. And all I could think was, I should have left him when I had the chance. But I didn't, because I was scared, because I thought love meant forgiveness, because I thought it was safer to keep the peace than to risk starting a war. I was wrong. My name is Margaret Elkins, and I'm an 85-year-old retired trauma nurse from Idaho Falls. I used to work nights in the emergency room, where we'd treat accident victims, overdose cases, and even the occasional child who'd been disciplined too hard. I never imagined my own family would become the case no one could save. I'm blonde, though my hair's mostly silver now, and arthritis keeps me slower than I used to be. I don't have many friends anymore. Most of them passed on or drifted away after retirement. But I still have my stories. And this one still wakes me up in cold sweats. Let me take you back. Back before the blood. Back before the bruises. Back to when I thought marrying Walter Elkins was the safest decision of my life. Walter was charming. He wasn't my first love, but he was the one who promised I'd never be alone in my golden years. We met at a church picnic. He brought me lemonade, told me I had the kindest eyes he'd ever seen. I was a widow then. My first husband, Richard, had passed in his sleep. I was 52 and lonely. Walter filled a void. He helped around the house, cooked, fixed broken things, took me dancing at the senior center. But what no one saw was how he also controlled the thermostat, or how he locked the phone in the drawer so we wouldn't get telemarketers, or how he'd make fun of my weight and say it was just teasing. I should have seen the signs. The control began small. Walter didn't like me wearing lipstick anymore. Said it made me look like a hussy. So I stopped. Then he wanted to manage our finances. Said I was too forgetful to handle bills. I let him. When he raised his voice the first time and punched the wall beside my head, I told myself it was a fluke. But flukes don't bruise your arm when you reach for the car keys. Flukes don't slam your walker into the closet when you try to go visit your sister. Still, I stayed. Because he'd always apologize. Because he'd buy me a new cardigan and say he was just tired. Because I believed that at my age, starting over wasn't an option. Then came Joshua. My daughter, Janine, passed away in a car accident 10 years ago. She left behind her only child, my sweet grandson Joshua, barely 6 at the time. The court granted me guardianship. I was 75 years old and suddenly a mother again. Joshua was sunshine. He had dimples deep enough to hide secrets in, and he called me Mimi with a kind of affection that made my heart melt. Walter wasn't thrilled. He said the boy was disruptive. That we didn't sign up to be parents again. He barely looked at Joshua those first few months. But one night I heard it, a sharp crack echoing down the hallway. Joshua had dropped a glass of milk. He was crying, apologizing, and Walter was holding his belt. I froze. It was the first time I saw Walter raise his hand to a child. "Walter, he's just a kid," I whispered. "You want him to grow up soft? He needs discipline," he snapped. I took Joshua to his room, cradled him, whispered promises I wasn't sure I could keep. I should have reported him that night, but the fear of losing my grandson to the system, it paralyzed me. The violence got worse. It wasn't every day. Sometimes, Walter would go weeks being gentle, almost kind. But then the switch would flip. He once locked Joshua in the garage for 3 hours because he spilled juice on the rug. Another time, he cut the boy's hair with kitchen scissors out of spite. I begged. pleaded, warned him I'd tell someone. And then one night, he turned on me. I had shielded Joshua during an argument. Walter shoved me so hard, I fell against the oven door. My hip cracked. He didn't help me up. He just stood there, breathing heavily, saying, "You should have stayed out of it." That's when I started planning our escape. But I was too slow. Then came that morning. Joshua had forgotten to take the trash out. He was 12 now, taller, with those same dimples, but he was tired. Always tired. Quiet. Walter lost it. I was folding laundry when I heard the scream. By the time I reached the kitchen, it was already too late. Joshua was on the floor. Blood from his lip, his arms, his side. Walter stood over him, belt in hand, his face red with rage. I rushed forward. He shoved me again. I don't remember much after that, just the sirens. The neighbors had finally called. But not before Walter had done the unthinkable. And now I sit in an old recliner, staring at a photo of Joshua's last school picture. I keep it next to my oxygen tank and my Bible. Walter was arrested. He's serving life. Joshua didn't survive the internal bleeding. And me. I carry his memory like a second skin. But what you don't know, what even the police didn't expect, is what I did after Walter's sentencing. And that's the part one haven't told anyone. Not until now. You'd think justice would bring peace. That seeing Walter in handcuffs, being led away from the courtroom with his head down, would have been enough to make me breathe again. But the silence in my home after Joshua died, it wasn't peace. It was a coffin I was walking through every day. I couldn't touch his room for weeks. His shoes stayed by the door. His last art project, an awkward drawing of a house and stick figures, remained taped to the fridge, curling at the corners. And everywhere I turned, I saw ghosts. I didn't just lose my grandson. I lost the one reason I kept fighting. The state offered me a therapist. Social workers called. Neighbors dropped off casseroles like grief could be eaten in spoonfuls. I smiled politely. I said thank you. But I wasn't okay. I'd stand in the hallway and whisper, "I'm sorry, Joshua. I should have gotten you out sooner." And every time, I imagined his little voice saying, "It's okay, Mimi. I know you tried." But my bones ached with guilt. My lungs felt too tired to fill. And then I got a letter. From Walter. Prison mail. I stood by the mailbox, trembling as I unfolded it. The handwriting was messy, slanted, aggressive. "You ruined my life. You turned my own family against me. But I still remember how you used to look at me. Don't pretend you didn't love me once. I'll get out, you'll see. And when I do, we'll talk, face to face." I ripped the letter into shreds right there in the yard. But that wasn't the end of it. The next week, I got another one. Then another. He was writing every week. Mocking me. Blaming me. Threatening to fix things when he got out on appeal. He wasn't just behind bars. He was reaching for me, even from a concrete cage. I went to the police. They shrugged. "He's in prison, ma'am. It's just words." Just words. These were the same hands that beat a boy to death. The same lips that smiled as he did it. I felt like I was being strangled with invisible hands. Every knock at the door. Every creak on the porch. Was it someone sent by him? One night, I stayed awake holding my old kitchen knife. Not for cooking. For protection. I realized then, I couldn't live like this anymore. I needed to do something unthinkable. I started researching. I was a nurse for over 30 years. I knew how institutions worked. I knew about internal complaints, medical files, security gaps. And I knew one thing for sure. If the system wouldn't protect me from Walter, I had to use the system against him. First, I reached out to someone I never thought I'd call again, Detective Linda Sharp. She was the officer who'd first arrived at my house after Joshua died. Blonde. Sharp voice. No time for nonsense. I told her about the letters. She narrowed her eyes. I'll put a request for mail restriction. But Margaret, if you're planning something, don't. Let the law handle it. But the law had handled it. And yet here I was, sleeping with a kitchen knife. So I smiled and said, "Of course, detective." And then I went home and opened my old laptop. I created a new identity. Fake name. Generic Gmail. Nothing traceable. I joined a pen pal website for prisoners. It was easier than I expected. There were hundreds of lonely, forgotten inmates on those lists, including Walter Elkins. I pretended to be a woman named Cheryl from Texas. Divorced. Sympathetic. Looking for someone who'd made mistakes and wanted forgiveness. Within 2 weeks, he replied. "Cheryl, you remind me of someone I loved once." She turned on me. "But you listen. Maybe God finally sent me someone who understands." I wanted to vomit, but I kept writing. I fed his ego. I asked about his past. I listened like I cared. Until he slipped up. 3 months into our exchange, he bragged. I still got friends on the outside. If I wanted, I could make life hard for the old hag. But you, Cheryl, you make me feel calm. Like I don't need to hurt anymore. That was it. I printed the letter. I took it straight to Detective Sharp. She blinked as she read it, then looked up at me. "You tricked him into admitting this?" "No," I said. "He exposed himself. I just gave him a mirror." She nodded slowly. And then the real investigation began. Turns out, Walter was running a scheme. From prison. He had 3 pen pals sending him money. He'd convinced 2 elderly women he was innocent, told them I framed him, that I was some bitter old crone with a grudge. He used that money to pay a former cellmate to send a warning to me. It didn't happen yet, but it was in motion. The police intercepted the plan, and thanks to Cheryl's correspondence, Walter's sentence was upgraded. No parole, no contact, no loopholes. He'd die behind bars. You'd think I'd feel relief. I didn't, because every victory came too late. Joshua was still gone. I walked past his room that night, opened the door, and found the drawing had finally fallen off the fridge. I picked it up. And that's when I made the decision. I would dedicate the rest of my life to children like Joshua. But just as I began the foundation, something unexpected happened. A knock at the door. A teenage girl. She looked like Janine. Blonde. Blue-eyed. Scared. "Mimi," she whispered. "My name's Ellie, and I think I'm your granddaughter." I just stood there, clutching the doorknob, my breath caught somewhere between memory and disbelief. "My name's Ellie, and I think I'm your granddaughter." Her voice was soft. Hesitant. Her eyes, big, blue, terrified, were rimmed red like she'd been crying. I blinked. "What did you just say?" She held up a crumpled envelope. Inside was a faded photo of my daughter Janine. Janine as a teenager, grinning on a beach towel, belly slightly rounded. Pregnant. I remembered that day. We'd taken a short trip to Oregon right after she finished high school. She hadn't told me she was pregnant then. She hadn't told anyone. I stared at the photo. There was handwriting on the back. "To my daughter, if you ever find her. Love always, Janine." I stepped aside. Slowly. Cautiously. "Come in, sweetheart." She shuffled past me like a shadow. Thin, shoulders hunched, gripping the sleeves of her oversized hoodie like a shield. I brought her tea, sat her on the couch, watched her as if I was seeing a ghost that had come back to ask why I stopped believing in miracles. I thought Joshua was Janine's only child, I finally said. Ellie looked down into the mug. She was 16 when she had me. Gave me up in the hospital. Said the family wouldn't understand. I grew up in foster care. But after she died, I started looking for her. Then I found the photo and a name. She looked at me now, eyes filling. Margaret Elkins. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. How many years had I spent mourning Janine? How many nights did I fall asleep holding her sweater, whispering apologies I could never say to her face? And now, sitting on my couch, was the daughter she never told me she had. A second chance. Or maybe a warning. Because as Ellie's story unraveled, so did the truth. Her life had been hell. Ellie had lived in 6 different homes by age 12. She was in and out of shelters, schools, sometimes living with strangers who treated her like a burden. And worse, some didn't treat her like a child at all. I've seen things, Mimi, she said softly, eyes staring into nothing. Things no kid should ever see. And yet, she was kind, gentle, quiet in that same way Joshua had been, tender, like life had bruised her, but hadn't broken her all the way. Still, there was something I couldn't shake. A feeling in my gut, a chill under my skin, like something wasn't adding up. That night, I watched her sleep on the living room sofa, curled up like a child who hadn't known safety in years. I wanted to believe this was a gift from God, a piece of Janine sent back to me when I was too numb to pray. But old instincts die hard, and mine had been sharpened by decades in trauma wards, where victims sometimes wore the kindest faces. So I checked. The next morning, while Ellie was in the shower, I opened her backpack. Inside were a few clothes, a tattered book of poetry, and a bottle of prescription pills. They weren't hers. They were mine. From my locked cabinet. How had she gotten them? When she came out wrapped in my towel, I confronted her gently. Ellie, honey, did you take something from my room? She froze. Her fingers tightened around the towel. I just couldn't sleep. I wasn't gonna take it, I saw your name on the bottle and panicked. Why did you panic? Her mouth opened, closed. Then she whispered, because someone's following me. And I don't think it's safe here either. My heart dropped. What do you mean someone's following you? She shook her head, trembling. I don't know his name, but I ran from the last home. The man, he said if I ever told anyone what he did to me, he'd find me. He has friends. He watches me. He said he'd burn down any house I stayed in. I stared at her. Was this trauma? Or manipulation? I didn't know. But I did know one thing. I'd already lost one child in this house. I wasn't about to lose another. So I called the police. Not to arrest her. To ask for protection. An officer came by to file a report. Took down Ellie's story. Promised to look into the man she described. But as the officer left, he turned to me and said, "Ma'am, keep your doors locked. Just in case. These kinds of predators don't stop." The words echoed in my skull. Just in case. That night, I triple-checked the locks. Closed all the blinds. Ellie was asleep in Joshua's old room. And I stayed on the couch with my phone in hand. At 3:17 a.m., the porch light flickered. I sat up. And then I heard it. A soft scratching at the back window. I crept to the hallway. peered through the curtain, and froze. A man was standing in the yard, staring straight at the house. No flashlight, no phone, just him, in the dark, watching. And he looked familiar. I recognized him, not from life, from photos. I rushed to the drawer, pulled out the court records, mugshots, prison files. There he was. Not Walter, but a man Walter had once shared a cell with, Dean Harper. The same man police suspected had been paid to send me a message. And now he was here. Why? How? Was he sent again? Or was this something else? Before I could call the police, I heard the back door click. Unlocked. I turned, and standing behind me was Ellie, holding my keys, and whispering, "I didn't think he'd find us so soon." Ellie stood there, barefoot on the wooden floor, holding my keys like they didn't belong to me anymore. "He found us," she whispered again, her voice trembling. My throat tightened. Us. I glanced back toward the yard. Dean Harper was gone. Just shadows now, thick and wet with the silence of night. My heart pounded as I turned back to Ellie. "What do you mean, he found us?" "Ellie, you need to tell me the truth." She didn't look scared anymore. Just sad. "He told me you were the only person left who could help," she said softly. "But I didn't know if I could trust you." My knees nearly gave out. "Help." I grabbed a chair, my fingers trembling against the table edge. "Ellie, baby, start from the beginning. Who exactly is he to you?" She sat down across from me, her eyes glassy, the porch light outside flickering once more. Then she said something I'll never forget. "He's my father." I stared at her like the air had been knocked from my lungs. "But that's not possible," I croaked. "Your mother, Janine, she never told me." Ellie nodded. "Because she couldn't." And then the story poured out like poison through a cracked dam. The truth about Dean Harper. Janine had run away from home at 16. I thought she went to live with friends. But what I didn't know was that she had met Dean, a smooth-talking older guy who picked her up outside a gas station. She got pregnant shortly after. When she realized what kind of man he really was, violent, controlling, and criminal, she tried to leave him. She found a safe haven at a shelter, gave birth to Ellie under an alias, and put her up for adoption out of fear that Dean would find her. Years later, Janine returned home, pregnant with Joshua from a different man. She never told me about Ellie or Dean. She thought that chapter was closed. But it wasn't, because Dean eventually went to prison, and there he met Walter. Two monsters, one cell, one shared story. Ellie learned that while searching through Dean's records, they traded stories in there, she said. Dean told Walter about Janine. Walter told him about you, about Joshua, about everything. My stomach turned. "Walter hated you," she added, voice low. "But Dean, he obsessed over you. Thought you were the reason Janine left. The reason she died." Tears slipped down her cheek. "And he made me come here." The world tilted. "What do you mean made you?" She broke. "I didn't want to. He found me 6 months ago. He said if I didn't find you and keep tabs, he'd kill the only foster mom who ever cared about me. He showed me photos. Her house. Her school. I couldn't breathe. So I came," she whispered. "But I didn't know it would feel like home again." She started to cry for real now, and for the first time, I didn't doubt her. I saw myself in her, scared, trapped, pretending to be brave, just like I had when I stayed with Walter. I walked around the table and pulled her into my arms. "You're safe now," I said into her hair. "You hear me? He's not touching you. Or me." ever again. But in the back of my mind, I knew it wasn't over. The police didn't believe us. The next morning, I called Detective Sharp. She listened, but her voice was tight. We have no evidence Dean was at your house, Margaret. No prints. No video. And Ellie's story, there's no legal record of her ever being Janine's daughter. She's not even in the adoption database under that name. She told me the agency changed her name, I said. Even so, without a match, we can't open a case. I slammed the phone down harder than I meant to. No one was going to protect us, so I would. I reinforced the house. I changed the locks. Bought security cameras, cheap ones, but good enough. I dug out an old hunting rifle from the attic, cleaned it, oiled it, and set it by my bed. And I gave Ellie a rule. If anyone approached the house, even the mailbox, she had to call out. Loud. Clear. No secrets. For 3 days, we lived in uneasy peace. Ellie helped me cook. She dusted every shelf. She read poetry aloud in the evenings while I crocheted in my chair. And every night before bed, she'd whisper, "Good night, Mimi." For the first time in years, I started to feel whole again. But peace in this house never lasts. On the 4th night, I woke up to the faint sound of the alarm chime. Someone had opened the front door. I grabbed the rifle, crept down the hallway. My heart pounded in my ears as I neared the living room. And then I saw him, Dean Harper, standing there, inside. His eyes locked on mine like he'd been expecting me. "Hello, Margaret," he said, smiling like he was saying grace. "You don't look like the woman Janine described. She made you sound a lot tougher." I raised the rifle. "Get out of my house." He didn't move. "Where's Ellie?" he asked. I stepped forward. "Gone." I lied. "She left." He smirked. "Try again. I heard her whispering last night. Still call you Mimi, huh?" His hand slid behind his back. That's when I saw the glint of metal. A knife. And before I could react, before I could pull the trigger, he lunged. We crashed into the side table. The rifle fell, skidding across the hardwood floor. He was strong. Too strong. My bones couldn't hold up to the weight of a man who'd spent a lifetime in rage. I screamed for Ellie, but my voice barely came out. And then suddenly, he was off me, pulled backward. By Ellie. With the fireplace poker. She swung it into his ribs. Then again. And again. Until Dean crumpled, coughing, bleeding, groaning. She stood over him, crying, her arms trembling. "You don't get to win this time." The police came. Dean survived. Barely. He was arrested, charged with multiple felonies, and finally, the pieces lined up. Fingerprints. Witness testimony. The photo from Janine with Ellie's DNA confirmed her identity. The court couldn't believe it. 2 monsters had conspired. 2 survivors had fought back. And now, it was our house again. But just when we thought we could breathe, a letter arrived. From prison. Not from Dean. From Walter. It read, "You thought this was over, didn't you, Margaret? But Dean was never the only one. You should know better by now. There's still one more coming. And this one, you'll never see coming." The letter sat on my kitchen table like a loaded gun. "There's still one more coming. And this one, you'll never see coming." Walter's handwriting hadn't changed. Tight, sharp loops. Like someone carving anger into the paper. My hands trembled. I thought it was over. Dean was behind bars. Ellie and I had survived. The doors were locked. The house was finally quiet. But now, The silence felt like bait. Ellie read the letter 3 times, then looked up at me with hollow eyes. "Do you think he's bluffing?" she asked. I wanted to lie, to say yes, to say monsters only get one chapter in your life, and then the story ends. But I'd been married to Walter. I knew better. He wasn't just cruel, he was calculating. And if he said someone else was coming, that meant someone was already here. We went straight to the police. Detective Sharp met us at the station. Her jaw clenched as she read Walter's words. "We'll request surveillance on any known associates," she said. "But Margaret, he's in a maximum security prison. He's cut off." "No," I said. "He's connected. That's the difference." Sharp exhaled. "There's a limit to what we can do without a direct threat. It's vague." Vague. It felt like a countdown. I left the station furious and terrified, so I did what Walter never expected. I dug into his past. I pulled out the old marriage license, letters from his estranged family. A few names stood out. Charles Elkins, Walter's younger brother. Henry Hawk Monroe, his childhood friend, once arrested for arson. And one name I'd never heard before, Emily Sharp. Yes, Sharp. As in Detective Sharp. I felt sick. That night, I sat by the fireplace, holding the paper in one hand and a cup of tea in the other. Ellie sat across from me, eyes flicking toward the window every few seconds. "Mimi, do you think it could be her?" I stared into the fire. "I don't know, baby. But if Walter planted someone this close to the investigation, we're not safe." Ellie whispered, "Then we need to find her weakness." The next day, we tested her. I called Detective Sharp from Ellie's phone. Used a blocked number. I disguised my voice, said I was a friend of Dean Harper's. Said I had a message from Walter. Sharp didn't panic. Didn't hang up. She just said, "Meet me tomorrow. Parking garage. 3rd level. Alone." Then she hung up. We never went. Instead, we hacked together an old trail cam and pointed it at the parking garage from the window of a nearby motel. What we saw chilled us. She showed up. Not in uniform, but in black jeans, hoodie, and gloves. She waited. Alone. For over an hour. And when no one came, she got in a black SUV with Charles Elkins in the passenger seat. It was her. Walter's last play. His blood. His brother. His network. And the detective leading our case. Everything we thought was safe, wasn't. Everything we'd reported was being fed straight back to him. That night, we packed to leave. "I know a cabin," I told Ellie. "It's old, barely functional, but no one knows about it. Not even Walter." It was a hunting shack my first husband and I had bought in 1968. Never listed. Never updated. I hadn't been there in 30 years. But it was off-grid. Perfect for hiding. Or so I thought. We left before sunrise. Ellie held the shotgun while I drove. We crossed state lines. Took back roads. Every time a black SUV passed, my stomach clenched. When we reached the woods, it was nearly dark. The cabin stood like a forgotten tooth in the middle of the forest. Dusty. Damp. But secure. Or so I thought. That night, the generator kicked on. I made soup from a can. Ellie curled up by the window. And for the first time in a week, we didn't speak about death. We talked about life. Books. How Joshua used to chase fireflies in the backyard. How Janine once cut her hair with safety scissors and blamed the dog. It felt almost normal. Until the radio turned on by itself. Crackling static. Then a voice. Walter's voice. "You never saw me coming, did you, Margaret? You never asked yourself who'd be willing to wait, to watch, to listen for years. The voice echoed through the cabin. You looked in all the wrong places, but the one you never questioned was the one right beside you. I turned to Ellie. She looked terrified. Then slowly, she smiled. Not wide, not cruel, just calm, like she'd rehearsed it 100 times. And she said, "I'm sorry, Mimi. I didn't want to do it, but he's the only father I've ever known." I felt the room shrink. The walls pulsed like a heartbeat. The fire crackled behind me, spitting little embers into the darkness. And Ellie, my Ellie, stood there calmly with a look I couldn't read anymore. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. She just stared at me with soft, apologetic eyes and whispered again, "I didn't want to do it, but he's the only father I've ever known." My throat locked. "You told me Dean Harper was your father." She shook her head slowly. "I said he raised me. That doesn't make him my father." I clutched the edge of the table for balance. "Who are you?" She looked down, then reached into her pocket and pulled out an ID. A real one, issued by the state of Nevada. The name read, Eloise Margaret Elkins. My heart cracked in half. Walter's daughter. Walter had a child from a previous relationship, one he never told me about. She was born while he was in and out of prison. Her mother was addicted. Died when the girl was 8. The state placed her in foster care. And Walter, he began writing to her the moment he was locked up for Joshua's death. He fed her stories. Told her I was the reason her brother, Joshua, was gone. Told her I manipulated the courts. Lied about him. That I kept her from knowing the truth. He poisoned her mind. 4 years. "I came here to hurt you," she said, finally sitting down. "To make you pay for what I thought you did. But then I saw you." She looked up at me. "Saw how you kept Joshua's memory alive. How you whispered his name when you thought no one could hear. How do you still talk to Janine like she's in the room?" She swallowed hard. "And I realized, you didn't kill him. You loved him." Tears filled her eyes now, but I didn't know if they were real. "You were the first person who ever hugged me without wanting something back," she said. "The first person who called me baby." But it wasn't over. Because when the voice came through that radio, that wasn't a recording. It was live. There was no reception at the cabin. No Wi-Fi. No signal. No reason a radio should have picked up anything except static. Unless someone was close, watching. Broadcasting. I grabbed Ellie's shoulders. "Is someone here, Ellie? Did you bring someone with you?" She hesitated. Then her eyes darted to the window. My body reacted before my brain did. I pulled her down and crawled toward the back wall of the cabin. Through a slit in the logs, I saw it. A shadow. Tall. Carrying something that glinted in the moonlight. He was circling the cabin. "I didn't tell him where we were," Ellie whispered, panicking now. "I swear." "I told him I couldn't go through with it. I thought if I turned off the phone, if I grabbed her face. He's here." I shoved the old trapdoor open under the rug and pushed her inside. "Go. Hide. Don't come out until I say." She shook her head. "What about you?" I handed her the shotgun. "Protect yourself. You've been lied to long enough." I went outside alone. I had a flare, an old hunting knife, and 40 years of pain turned into steel in my veins. "Show yourself," I shouted. The woods stayed quiet. Then a voice came from behind me. You always were dramatic, Margaret. Walter. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes, still full of rot. I paid someone to swap names with me, he said, smiling like a madman. Slipped out 2 nights ago. No one even noticed. Do you know how easy it is to disappear when the world thinks you're already gone? I backed away. You're sick. He shrugged. Maybe. But at least I finished what I started. He lunged. We fought. Old bodies. Old bones. But rage is a strange kind of strength. He slammed me into the ground, but I kicked his knee. He stumbled, knife falling. I reached for it, and then a bang shattered the silence. Walter collapsed beside me. Ellie stood behind him, the shotgun in her trembling hands. She was shaking violently. I didn't come here to kill anyone, she said, tears falling. I just wanted to know who I was. The aftermath. Walter died in the woods that night. The authorities found the body. The man he'd swapped identities with was returned to custody. Detective Sharp was arrested for obstruction and aiding escape. It took weeks to unravel the web. Months for Ellie to feel safe again. And me. I finally slept. Really slept. Without a knife under my pillow. But one morning, Ellie brought me breakfast in bed. She smiled and said, "You know, I don't think I ever stopped being your granddaughter." I looked at her. "You're not Janine's daughter," I said gently. "No," she replied. "But I'm Joshua's sister. And I think that makes us family." The days after Walter's death moved slowly, like winter thawing. I stayed in the cabin with Ellie for a few weeks. No TV, no phones, just us. The forest was still cold, but inside the cabin, something was beginning to warm. We cooked. We talked. We healed. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting to die. I felt like I had someone to live for. One morning, Ellie made pancakes. Real ones, with syrup and scrambled eggs on the side. "Mimi," she said, sliding the plate over. "What if we turned this place into something bigger?" I looked up. Bigger. She nodded. A safe house. For women. Or girls like me. Like Janine. Like Joshua. Tears stung my eyes. "That would have made Janine proud," I whispered. "No," she said gently. "It would have made you proud. You saved us, Mimi. You saved me." I reached for her hand. And just when I thought peace might finally stay, the letter arrived. We had forwarded our mail to a post office box in town. Ellie picked it up once a week, and this time, she looked shaken as she handed me the envelope. The return address? No name. No number. Just a stamp. Inside was a birth certificate. A real one. For Ellie. Mother, Janine Elkins. Father, unknown. I stared at it, speechless. Ellie whispered, "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." But it didn't stop there. Tucked behind the certificate was a photo. Janine and a baby. The same beach towel. The same vacation I remembered. And I, me, Margaret Elkins, was holding the baby. My knees buckled. She had been there. Janine hadn't gone to the hospital alone. She hadn't hidden Ellie from me. I was there. And I'd forgotten. A trauma nurse, a mother, and I had forgotten. But then it clicked. The stroke. 10 years ago. Minor, the doctors said. No permanent damage. But memories, the ones wrapped in pain, had disappeared like smoke. I had held Ellie as a baby. I kissed her forehead. And somehow, that moment had been buried under years of grief and fear. I showed Ellie the photo. We sat in silence. Then she looked at me with a tear-streaked smile and said, So I am your granddaughter? I nodded. Yes, baby. You always were. We went back to the city. We sold the house on 7th Street. Too many memories. Too many ghosts. We used the money to restore the cabin, turned it into a real retreat, painted the walls, bought new beds, hung a plaque over the door. Joshua's Place, a home for the hurt, the healing, and the hopeful. Women came. Quiet ones. Loud ones. Mothers. Teenagers. Grandmothers. Some with bruises on their skin. Some with bruises on their hearts. We took them all. And every night, we sat by the fire and told stories. Not just of pain, but of survival, of redemption. But just when I thought the world had nothing left to throw at us, I got a call. It was late. I had just finished reading a bedtime story to a 6-year-old girl whose mother had run from an abuser. The phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. The voice on the line? Dean Harper. Thought you were rid of me, didn't you? He said, laughing lightly. Well, turns out prison walls have cracks. And I've got friends on the outside. Friends who still owe Walter favors. My hand gripped the phone tighter. What do you want? I asked. To finish what Walter couldn't. And don't worry. I won't be the one knocking on your door. Someone else already is. Click. I stared at the phone. My knees gave way. I dropped to the couch. Ellie came running. What happened? I couldn't speak. Just handed her the phone. Because I knew. The past wasn't done with us. Not yet. I didn't sleep that night. Dean Harper's voice kept echoing in my ears like a ghost slipping through the walls. I won't be the one knocking on your door. Someone else already is. We had survived monsters. We had buried Walter. But evil doesn't need a name to knock. Sometimes it wears a familiar face. And now, we had no idea who it might be. Ellie tried to stay strong, but I saw it in her eyes. Fear was back. She slept with the shotgun beside her bed again. I locked every window, double-checked every motion sensor on the property. The retreat was full. 6 women, 4 children, and 2 volunteers, but no one knew what was coming. So I did what I've always done in moments like this. I went into the basement and opened the metal box I swore I'd never touch again. Inside, old court files, newspaper clippings, a thumb drive labeled W. I plugged it into my laptop, and what I saw made my stomach turn. A file marked contingency. Dozens of photos. Women. Children. Some with dates. Some with addresses. Some with our cabin in the background. Dean hadn't been bluffing. Walter had planned this for years. A system. A network. The woman he wanted was gone. Witnesses who'd testified. One woman on the list. A social worker who'd visited our home the year Joshua died. She vanished 3 months later. And at the bottom of the list was Ellie's name. Ellie Margaret Elkins. I ran outside. She was in the garden, watering herbs with one of the younger girls. When I called her name, she turned, and I saw the fear return before I even spoke. I handed her the drive. She scanned the list, and then her knees buckled. I know this name, she whispered, pointing to a woman. Cheryl Martin. She raised me. My last foster mom. The one who got sick. The one I told Dean I'd do anything to protect. I leaned in. What happened to her? Ellie's voice dropped to a whisper. She died 2 months ago. In a house fire. We took the files to the sheriff. Not the city police, the sheriff. Someone Walter didn't have ties to. He read everything twice, then looked us dead in the eye and said, "You're not safe here anymore." That's when we made a choice. We evacuated the cabin. We put the women and children on buses, gave them prepaid phones, split them across 3 different shelters. Ellie and I stayed behind. We set up decoys, dummy cars in the driveway, fake silhouettes in the windows. And then we waited. 2 nights later, they came. A black pickup truck. 3 men. No plates. They parked down the hill, cut through the brush, flashlights off. But we had the advantage. We knew the land. The moment they stepped into the clearing, the motion lights triggered. And we were waiting. Shotgun raised. Rifle ready. "Don't move," Ellie shouted. 1 man ran. Another pulled a knife. The third, he pulled out his phone and said, "Walter sends his love." I fired into the dirt at his feet. He dropped the phone and screamed, hands in the air. The sheriff arrived minutes later. All 3 were arrested. Turns out, one of them had visited Dean Harper in prison a week earlier, posing as his attorney. They had maps of our land. Fake IDs. One even wore a shirt with our retreat's logo, trying to pose as a volunteer. It was over. For real this time. 6 months later, Joshua's place reopened. Stronger. Safer. Ellie became the official director. She enrolled in college, studying psychology and social work. She said, "If I'm going to heal, I want to help others do the same." I finally sold the last of Walter's properties and used the money to build a new wing at the retreat. We called it the Joshua Room, a quiet library filled with books, light, and hope. One evening, Ellie handed me a letter. No return address. I opened it. It was a drawing. A child's drawing. A stick figure woman. Silver hair. A smile. Standing next to a little boy holding her hand. On the bottom, in shaky letters, "Thank you for saving my mommy." There was no name, just love. I looked up at Ellie. "How did this get here?" She shrugged, smiling. "They just knew where to send it." I'm 85 now. Blonde hair mostly gone gray. Hands stiff from arthritis. But my heart has never been stronger. Walter is gone. Dean is locked away. But my story, our story, is far from over. Because every day, a new woman walks through our door with haunted eyes, and leaves with a little more light in her soul. And that's the only revenge I ever needed. I used to believe survival was the end goal. That if I could just outlive the pain, bury the monsters, and breathe again, then I'd finally be free. But I've learned something else. Survival is only the beginning. Healing is where the real war begins. And some wounds don't scream anymore. They whisper, at night, in quiet rooms, in the eyes of someone who looks just like the child you lost. After the attacks, Joshua's place flourished. Word spread about the quiet cabin that welcomed broken women and restored them with kindness. We had therapists volunteer. Local pastors donated clothes. Even retired nurses like me found a new purpose tending wounds, emotional ones more than physical. Ellie thrived. She began leading night circles with the women, sharing pieces of her story. But she never mentioned Walter's name. She called him the shadow from my past. It was better that way. One rainy afternoon, I was sorting canned goods when Ellie rushed in, pale, breathless. "Mimi, someone just arrived asking for you." I wiped my hands on my apron. "For me?" She said, "She's your niece. From your sister Clara." My heart paused. Clara and I hadn't spoken in over 40 years. Not since the will. Not since she said I was too soft to survive this world. "Did you get a name?" Ellie nodded. "Rebecca." I stepped into the entry hall. And there she was, blonde like Clara, eyes like Janine. She looked 50-something, wore a blue coat and held a soaked umbrella. She smiled. Aunt Margaret. I blinked. It was like time had looped in on itself. She stepped forward and hugged me gently. I know this is sudden, she said, but I've followed your story. After Walter died, I started digging. I found out about Joshua, about Janine, about everything. I studied her. And why now? Her eyes filled. Because I didn't know what family meant until I lost mine. And because I need help. She wasn't lying. Rebecca had bruises on her wrists, partially hidden by her sleeves. She wouldn't say who. Just that he was powerful, connected, and had threatened to ruin her if she spoke. I told her to stay. She refused shelter, but accepted lunch. Ellie watched her like a hawk. Later that night, I found Ellie at the kitchen sink, scrubbing the same dish for the 5th time. She's not who she says she is, Ellie muttered. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? She's been here before. I froze. What? Ellie turned, voice firm now. That woman came here 3 months ago under a different name. She asked about our security system. Said she was a donor. Are you sure? I never forget faces. I walked back to the office and pulled the visitor log. 3 months ago. Same face. Different name. Denise Harper. My fingers went numb. Harper. Dean's last name. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I watched. She stayed for 3 more days. Said she was helping around the kitchen. Asked about the children, where we stored medications, whether we had a generator backup. It was too specific, too rehearsed. So I called the sheriff again. This time, I asked for someone I trusted. Deputy Rhonda Green, a mother of 4, a survivor herself. She came the next morning, waited quietly in the shadows. And when Rebecca left the garden shed with a phone call, we followed her. We overheard it all. They don't suspect. The girl's still sharp, but the old one's tired. If we hit the generator and cut the cameras, they'll have no footage. Walter left a full list. We can clean it up in 2 hours. Rhonda stepped out, gun drawn. End the call. Now. Rebecca spun around, dropped the phone, and raised her hands. Who are you working with? I asked. Her face fell. I'm not working with anyone, she whispered. I'm trying to finish what he started. The story poured out in pieces. Rebecca wasn't Clara's daughter. She was Dean Harper's niece, raised by his sister. She grew up hearing that I was the reason their family lost everything. Walter's network ran deeper than we knew. He'd left instructions with multiple people, revenge seeds, he called them. Take her joy, take her place, and if you can, take her name. She wasn't there to kill me. She wanted to replace me. She had photos forged, old letters written to appear like they were from Clara. She planned to ease her way into the retreats board and seize it. Make Joshua's place into something else. Something dark. Deputy Green arrested her. But before she left, Rebecca said something that stuck in my chest like ice. You think you won. But men like Walter don't die. They plant things. And you water them. Every time you remember them, they grow again. The final months. The arrest made news. Again. Some donors backed out. Others doubled their support. But through it all, Ellie never left my side. One day, while I was knitting by the fire, she sat beside me and said, I've decided to legally change my name. I smiled. To what? She leaned her head on my shoulder. Ellie Margaret Elkins. In full. I want to carry what you gave me. Now. Now I don't see ghosts when I walk the halls. I see warriors. Each scar on these walls means someone survived. Each flower in the garden, planted by a woman who once thought she'd never be safe again. And me. I'm still here. Still blonde. Still stubborn. Still standing. Last week, a girl walked in with a single backpack and a black eye. She asked if she could stay one night. She's still here. We gave her a warm meal. And when I tucked her in, she said, "Are you someone's grandma?" I smiled. "No, honey. I'm everyone's grandma now." Candle, if you made it this far, then you felt what we lived through. But what would you have done if your husband killed your grandchild, and his ghost kept haunting you through others? Speech balloon comment, Justice found me, if you believe healing is the loudest revenge. Thumbs up like this story to show that pain doesn't get the final word. Bell subscribe for more chilling true stories where darkness doesn't win, but fights back hard. The scars may be silent, but our voices won't be.